What's up, guys? This is Curtis with AAA Forklifts. We're doing the inspection series here as part of our planned maintenance inspections that we do when we're on site, as well as what we do in the shop before final inspection when it ships to the customer. Today's part 3. So we did the first part was the visual inspection, second part was the brakes. Today is part 3 where we're going to be looking at the steering aspect of the forklift. And so for step 1, just to get into it, you want to check the overall steering operation. You want to make sure this thing steers, doesn't have a whole lot of play in the steering. And so we're going to start it up, drive it around, and make sure that when we're driving straight, this thing's not trying to walk all over the place, as well as look at the steering tires when we're rotating the steering wheel and make sure that it doesn't seem like there's any play in the tie rods. Then we'll jack up the rear end and start looking at all the components and where to grease and what have you. So hop on, click it or ticket. And we pretty much just want to make sure, for one, that this thing doesn't load up and install, which I'm going lock to lock, and everything looks tight. I'm also, when I go to steer, I have immediate response. If I had a little delayed response, I would make sure that when I jack up the rear, I want to look specifically at those tie rods to see if there's any play in the tie rod bushings. But everything looks good here. So we're just going to drive it forward, do a turn, come back, and then I'll back up. You just want to make sure that it's not walking all over the place. That looks good there. The other thing you want to do is make sure that the steering column is nice and tight. Everything looks good here. It's got the shock absorber where I can adjust my shock up and down. And then I also want to check and make sure that there's no oil leaks or anything coming from your orbitrol down into, and everything looks good there. So I'm going to jack up the rear of this, and that way we can get a better look at the components of the steering. Cool. And that's good in there. Now what I want to do, first thing I want to do is I want to check my wheel bearings. If this had solid pneumatic tires, I'd be wanting to make sure that all my lug nuts are nice and tight. Nothing looks loose or out of place. Sometimes you'll have rim where the hole is all wallered out from where the lug nut was loose, and it was driving around and open it up, and it'll look much bigger than what it should be. This one here is a cushion tire forklift, so pretty much it's just got the bearings. And so what you want to do with the bearings is you want to kind of rock it back and forth and see if you feel any play in the wheel bearing itself. You'll feel it if you do. And so on this one, I feel a little bit of rock in here. I can kind of feel where it's stopping. And of course you got to make sure you're not paying attention to the steer axle mount, which is another thing you want to look at. And when you were driving, if you felt any kind of squeaking, that usually comes from the steer axle mount bushings, which is what your axle pivots on. This one here is specifically on the wheel bearing itself. And so I've got a little bit of play here that I'm going to want to look at and open this up and see if we need to replace the wheel bearings. The other thing to look at when you're doing that, and I'll turn it to the right a little bit so that I can see, is I want to make sure that my kingpins aren't making a whole bunch of noise either. And so I'm going to turn it back straight. This unit here, yeah, I've got a little play on this side. So I'm going to quote wheel bearings on this unit because the kingpin's tight. I looked inside, and when I'm rocking it, my kingpin's not moving back and forth. So it has to be your inner and outer wheel bearings and seals. And I'm going to quote that. Now, the other thing that you can definitely see is, you see how the wheel is moving in left to right like that? When I turn this thing to the far right and expose that tie rod, I can see that right here, you can see the spindle is moving inside the pin. So these are tie rod bushings that need to be replaced. My inner right there looks good, but my outer, I'm seeing this spindle moving on that. So we've got a problem with our tie rods, as well as a problem with our wheel bearings. So we're going to quote pins and bushings, and we're going to quote the bearings and seals. The other thing you want when you're working on these is to keep these from going bad is the grease points right here. So you've got grease points on both your tie rods. That should grease that bushing. That's why they wear out, is because they have not been greased. So this is something that you want to do. There's also bushings most of the time on your axle pivots, but I don't see it on this one. But you want to check and make sure that your axle pivot bushings, if they have grease points, that you're doing the greasing on the axle as well. We can go to the other side over here and check and see what we got. And so your kingpins, so if you can see your tie rods on one, your kingpins are right back in here. Your grease point for the kingpins is going to be right there, and that greases the upper and the lower bearings for your kingpins. And this looks like pretty fresh grease. I can still see the red, just got a little dust on it. So this looks like it's been greased, but those tie rod bushings definitely weren't. Now I can see over here, I still have a little bit of play. So I want to see whether it's my inners or my outers. My opinion is, if you're going to do the outers, you might as well go ahead and do the inners at the same time. But I just want to check and see, and that way when I write up my paperwork, I can tell them whether or not it's the outers or the inners that are bad. This one looks like both of them are moving. So I can see this thing moving inside the wishbone, and then I can also see the wishbone moving inside that inner pin. So we need to quote inner and outer bushings on this as well. The other thing you're looking for, which is going to be part of our next section, is the tire wear. So I had mentioned in my visual inspection that if you see it wearing towards the inner side of the tire more than the outer, you want to pay attention to those kingpin bearings. These are wearing fine here, but that's just something I would look at when I'm doing my steering inspection. The other thing is the tires. This is getting down to the numbers here. So I am going to quote it for a future job. It's not something that needs to be done now, but it's definitely something that 6 months down the road, a year down the road, depending on how much they use it, they'll already have the quote in the system, and then they can just pull the trigger. We'll get out and do the tire replacement. The last thing you want to check is, and this is going to be kind of hard for you guys to look at, but you want to make sure that your steering hoses are in good shape. So I can see the steer hoses where they come into the cylinder. They've got a nice protective sheathing on it of the Kevlar, but you want to make sure there's no leaks or anything like that on the steer hoses themselves, and that they're not dry rotted or cracked. And these ones look fine, but the steer hoses come from the steering head, the orbitrol, and go to the steer cylinder, so you want to make sure that they're in good shape. Other than that, that is pretty much it on the steer section. So the next section we're going to do is the frame and tires. So we'll look more at the frame and tires there and go through some of the aesthetic parts of the forklift. But that's pretty much it for the steer section. If you guys could go on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, give us a like and subscribe. We're going to be going through the whole series on this unit, showing you guys what to look for, and then we can also help you guys and come out on site and do the preventive maintenance for you guys as well. It's $150 every 6 months for the maintenance. It includes the fluids, the filters, greasing the chassis, and this 120-point inspection that we're doing. So we will see you next time.